Now the engine swap exploit has sadly left us, we need to figure out what to do with those engines, and as it turns out, some of those engine and car combinations can actually be pretty damn useful. And today, as you can see, we're using the Le Mans method with a 4-rotor 787B swapped Mazda RX-7. And of course, this money-making method I've covered before, but we're going to be using a different car, and this might be the best one yet, to allow you to get 825,000 credits per race, obviously 1.65 million credits in an hour. But for those of you who don't know, it's the World Touring Car 700 event, of course listed under this track, which you can find in the World Circuits. Now without any further ado, let's get into what I've actually done to this RX-7. Unsurprisingly, we are running the wide body and some custom aero parts. You'll see on screen which ones I've added, so you can make sure they're the same and you won't get any discrepancies in the PP when we get to the setup. Speaking of which, we're running racing hard tyres. Of course, you need to make sure you also have purchased the intermediate and wet tyres for the changeable conditions. Moving on to the fully customizable suspension, those are the settings that we have there. Of course, that's somewhat down to personal preference. If you want to tweak it to find something that might work a little bit better for you, by all means feel free to experiment, and then you might have to adjust the power or the ballast accordingly if the performance points happen to go up. And then of course it's the same story with the fully customizable LSD, but as you can see I have mine set to 5, 5 and 5. Moving on to the downforce levels, and then our power restrictor and ballast. I've set the ballast to -10 because it lowers the performance points a little bit and allows me to get a little bit more power than what I initially thought I was going to be able to, and it hasn't really affected the handling at all from what I could tell. Transmission, very simple because it's just stock. You don't need to get the fully customizable transmission as that will raise the performance point level, and the stock one does a perfectly fine job. It will do almost 200 miles an hour during this event at the top of 5th gear with some revs to spare, so it works absolutely fine. And the only other modification that we have are the carbon brakes. Jumping into the event now, and the first thing I do is set my fuel map to 2. This thing is insanely fuel efficient and it can go the whole distance without pitting. Well, I say without pitting, without refueling, because depending on the weather you might need to pit the tyres, but if you do get lucky with the rain, you can do a 0 stop on this event. Although, as you'll see in a minute, that's not quite the case on this attempt. But, yep, the first lap, obviously, you just gotta keep it clean and pick your way through the field, and that massive straight line speed compared to the competition really does help. And by the start of the second lap, we're in touch with the leaders, which we of course soon pass. Then, towards the end of the lap, you need to make sure to have a look at your weather radar, because this is usually when the inclement conditions start to come in. So once again, make sure you have those wet and intermediate tyres if you need them. I choose not to stop here, although I usually do. The rain wasn't too heavy last time, so I thought, yeah, I should be able to get away with racing hards for at least another lap, which went well. Fortunately, the AI are also pretty useless with the changeable conditions and know what to do with their tyre strategy, and either way they're going to spend more time in the pits than you anyway. At the end of lap 3, I go in and put on some intermediate tyres. It was wet enough for full wets, but in case the track dried out, I didn't want to burn up the tyres, and I wanted to use these for at least 2 laps. Because this thing is so fuel efficient, of course you don't want to be pitting any more times than you need to. All credit to the RX-7 though, it was a lot easier than I expected to handle in the wet conditions, which of course made my life a lot easier and allowed me to make less mistakes. Although this thing is quick enough that you don't have to run a perfect race by any means. You can make mistakes with the strategy like I did and still have, as you can see, a healthy gap to the cars behind. I ended up staying on those intermediate tyres for 3 laps because just as the track was starting to dry out from the first rain shower, the heavens opened again and it got really wet. But it did eventually go dry fully. We pit at the end of lap 6, onto lap 7, which would be the final lap of the race. Now at this point in the later stages of the race, you might want to put your fuel map a bit higher just to make sure it gets to the end. I set mine to 4 for the final lap and a bit, and we still had over half a minute gap to the car in front, despite all the drama that happened in this race. And we eventually do cross the line, almost 40 seconds ahead, and now 825,000 credits richer. And as I said in the intro, I think this is the best car I've used for this event. It's really fun to drive, and of course it sounds amazing. But that's going to be it from me. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good day.